One story that hits home for me as someone with other friends like Dana Rohrabacher and Steve King have met with Baloch leaders from the Baloch area, the Balochistan area of Pakistan. It's the area where most of Pakistan's minerals are located. It's an area where Pakistan has, for many years, terrorized the Baloch people, killed them, just persecuted them mercilessly. They want the Baloch area's minerals and assets to keep Pakistan going and basically radicalized, but they don't want to let the people live in peace. I have proposed in a previous op-ed a couple of years ago that perhaps it's time to look at encouraging a new Baloch state, a new country of Balochistan, as independent of Pakistan, so that the people can live in peace, so they don't have to be worried about Pakistan officials and military coming through and committing really crimes against these people. After I wrote that op-ed and included a statement that perhaps it's time to join in the encouragement for a new Balochistan state, there was an article in the Pakistani daily paper that said that, in essence, maybe it is time to quit persecuting the Baloch, reach out to them, and try to figure out a way where we could let them live in, or they could let them live in peace, because to Pakistan that area was important. And the op-ed from the Pakistan paper also indicated that perhaps they needed to quit funding and helping the Taliban defeat the Americans in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and just concentrate on their own country. That would have been wonderful, and would still be. This story is out from the Toronto Sun, and since it regards the Balochistan province in Pakistan, and by the way, I'd heard from numerous of our American military and from others in Afghanistan that most of the supplies to the Taliban are coming from Pakistan through the Baloch area of Pakistan. And that's why the thought was triggered, well, maybe if Balochistan was independent of Pakistan, that would cut off the supply to the terrorist Taliban in Afghanistan and would save a lot of American lives. But since that had been said, we've lost hundreds more American soldiers, lots more American blood has been shed because we have failed to neutralize the Taliban, and they have continued apparently to grow in their efforts to take over Afghanistan shortly after we leave. This article, though, says it would have been inconceivable that any U.S. official, let alone a Secretary of State, would host a delegation from Serbia the day after mass graves were discovered in Srebrenica in 1995. Yet on Sunday, a day after bullet-ridden bodies were discovered in suspected mass graves in Pakistan's military-controlled province of Balochistan, Secretary of State John Kerry was toasting a delegation of Pakistan security officials at the State Department. Balochistan and human rights officials say 169 bodies have been uncovered so far. Pakistani officials put the number at 15. Victims and families of Baloch youth disappeared and who are feared to be among the decomposed bodies being unearthed from the mass graves, had hoped that Kerry would raise the issue with his Pakistani counterpart. Instead, they heard Kerry say to Pakistanis, "We're really delighted to have you back, and I look forward to our continued conversation." America looked the other way in 1971 when the Pakistan Army slaughtered 1 million of its own citizens in what is now Bangladesh. What emerged was a country that hosted the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, allowed Osama bin Laden to operate on its soil for more than a decade, and whose terrorists have been involved in numerous jihadi attacks around the world, ever since the bombings of U.S. embassies in East Africa and the attack on USS Cole off Yemeni waters. Yet America continues to give Pakistan billions of dollars in aid, which is then turned around to generate more hatred towards the West and produce more jihadi terrorists. Inserting parenthetically into this article is my oft-quoted statement that you don't have to pay people to hate you. They'll do it for free. We continue to send billions of dollars to nations that hate us and want us gone from the map. They want to see us suffer, and we keep sending them money to hate us. We could use that money here. We could save raising some taxes. We could get some roads and some of the infrastructure that the president promised if we gave him $900 billion basically in a stimulus package right after he took office. And that was going to fix all the infrastructure, but maybe 6% of $900 billion went for infrastructure. And so the president's back out saying, we got to build these roads. I mean, we've been talking about this for 5 years. He has. So you didn't do it with the stimulus money. Why don't we just save some of the billions we're giving to people that hate us, and then we don't help them kill Americans? We don't continue, as this administration is doing, to assist Syrian rebels who are killing Christians. For anyone who happens to believe that there is a God as reflected in the Bible, the question would have to be asked, if there is such a God as reflected in the Bible, which I believe, is it going to bode well for a nation which is funding and helping nations that are killing, torturing, kidnapping Christians around the world? This article goes on. Now the U.S. is giving the same Pakistan Army another pass as it carries out the ethnic cleansing of the indigenous Baloch people from their homeland. In response, the Baloch have taken up arms and are fighting their fifth war of independence since 1948, when the Pakistani Army invaded and captured the independent and sovereign state of Kalat. The article goes on, but the fact is, we have people in this administration demanding that what they say are indigenous people, the fact that the children of Israel occupied the Promised Land 1,600 years or so, 1,700 years at least, before a man named Muhammad was born. Yet there are people who say, oh, but these Palestinians, name that arose, as Newt Gingrich pointed out, in the last 40 or so years, these Palestinians are indigenous, so you've got to give them their land. Yet they're not saying it about Balochistan. They're not saying it about the Baloch people that are being killed and persecuted by Pakistan. Oh, no. No, we're helping kill and persecute the Baloch people by giving aid and assistance to a government that's killing and persecuting them. If there is a just God in the universe, Would there not be a price for a country as powerful as the United States that continues to support those who kill, maim, torture, horrify innocent people, Christians, Jews, secularists, and oftentimes they're even more brutal to moderate Muslims that are not as radical as they think they should be. That's why in Egypt, for those who really have eyes and really have ears to hear, we had an incredible event last summer. This was the real Arab Spring, but it came in summer. This is when moderate Muslims, Christians, Jews, secularists rose up. Some reports of 33 million people, larger than any demonstration in the history of the world. They rose up and said, we don't want radical Islamists running in. And the radical Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood that were controlling Egypt, as we knew they would if they had an election too quickly, the Muslim Brotherhood became desperate because they knew to have a new Ottoman Empire running around the Mediterranean that would become a worldwide caliphate. They could not afford to lose Egypt from under their iron fist. So what do? They immediately start burning down churches, killing Christians particularly, and so many others. That's why I was so encouraged. Over 90% of the people voting, which was a higher percentage than we have voting here in the United States, they came out and voted for the new Constitution that has been drafted under the chairmanship of Amir Musa. I was very pleased that Chairman Musa was willing to come on the Sean Hannity radio show a few weeks ago when I was guest hosting for Sean Hannity, and it is really encouraging what's going on in Egypt by those who want a democratic form of government and who do not want terrorists running Egypt, who don't want a worldwide caliphate, who don't like the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood, who are not as blind to the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood as the leaders of this administration are. Because if one will just go look at one of the symbols used by the Muslim Brotherhood these days, you find the cross swords, the signs and wording in their language denoting the Muslim Brotherhood, and that is fixed over a globe of the world. And it's not just Egypt, Iraq, Iran, not just in the former Ottoman Empire. Oh, no. This is fixed over a globe that is revolving, and the United States of America passes under those swords of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it is true that the Muslim Brotherhood here in the United States does not want to utilize violence right now because they've made so much progress into this administration that they're afraid violence right now might do damage. Violence in Egypt, this same Muslim Brotherhood feels was necessary because they had just been caught, they had been rejected by moderate Muslims, the majority of Egyptians, and they became desperate. So their violence had to occur. Christians, according to these radical Islamist Muslim brothers, had to die. And so once America starts figuring out that the goal is global caliphate, including the United States, then they will be participating in horrendous violence here as they have in other places in the world. Some of our moderate Muslim friends in the Middle East asked some of us last September, what's wrong with you in America? Don't you understand? You call it Al-Qaeda, but that's really just an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are the ones that attacked you on 9/11/2001. These are moderate Muslims asking these questions. Well, why do you not understand? Yes, it was the Taliban, but it's really the Muslim Brothers behind it that you were at war with in Afghanistan. They were the ones that did more killing of Americans in Iraq, and yet you're helping the Muslim Brotherhood. You're running to their aid and assistance, and in Egypt you're demanding that either they put the radical Islamists back in charge of Egypt, or we're not going to provide them the Apache helicopters, the tanks, the jets that we were going to provide to the Muslim Brother leaders of Egypt. They asked, what's wrong with you people? What are you not getting? You're helping the people that want to destroy you. People can see that around the world, but here in Washington, D.C., it's apparently one of the hardest things to find and see. And we hear people saying, well, we really need all of people's most private information about phone calls, every phone call they make. We need to have that as part of the government because one time we believe it may have stopped a bombing. Well, if this administration would do their homework, they wouldn't need the logs of every phone call of every American. We could go back to what the Constitution does require, and the court should require, and that is probable cause before you start giving out personal information, before you let the government start monitoring every email of every person in America. Because we were promised, my freshman term, that if the paper extended, specifically Section 206 and 215, that would only apply if someone were in contact with a foreign terrorist. But Americans would never have to worry unless they were in touch with foreign terrorists. And then after Edward Snowden, we find out that actually that's what they promised was not true. And yes, that was during the Bush administration. I don't care. I don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat. I don't care where it started. When we find out it's still going on, it's got to stop. We're supposed to have some privacy in this country. And those Democrats that were suspicious of the Bush administration wanting that much power were right. So where have my friends gone now that it's a Democrat administration? I certainly don't have a problem calling out a Republican administration when they're not doing the right thing. And I wish my friends across the aisle would do the same thing and join me. What about the Boston bombing? The Russians took a huge risk in giving this administration information and saying, look, Tsarnaev, this guy has been radicalized. And you're letting him back in America, you're headed for trouble. This is a bad guy. They took a risk in giving us that information because when any country gives intelligence to another country, then sometimes it allows that country that gets the information to figure out how that other country is getting intelligence just by the information they get. And so now we have people here in this administration say, oh, the Russians, they didn't give us enough information. Are you kidding me? They told you a person had been radicalized. And when I asked the director of the FBI in our hearing about not even going to the mosque to investigate, he says ultimately, yeah, we did go to those mosques, and I didn't hear it at the hearing, I didn't hear it till the replay, and he said, under our outreach program. Under the outreach program? Well, that's the FBI's ridiculous former program where they have special outreach to Muslim